Well, the High Court in Pretoria today ruling that for the moment the Democratic Alliance can enforce an earlier ruling overriding a decision by the ANC-led Gauteng provincial government to appoint an administrator in Tshwane. This means the administrator appointed by the Gauteng provincial government will be removed and that the council will have to hold an election for the position of mayor. As the Democratic Alliance has the most councillors, it would appear they might now be in a position to elect a new mayor in Tshwane. The case came about after the council failed to hold an election in Tshwane following the resignation of the DA's Stevens Mokgalapa as mayor. Mike Moriarty is the chairperson of the Democratic Alliance in Gauteng. Mike, good afternoon to you. In your view then, the way that you understand this judgment, what does this mean for Tshwane? What happens next?
Well, what happens next is that they're going to have a council meeting and it's being set up for Friday morning at 10 o'clock to be held by virtual means. The Speaker is busy engaging with the various officials in order to make that happen. And there would be an election of a mayor in the normal way. So all of the preparations are being put in place to make that happen.
This is actually a court ruling that implements a judge's finding in the earlier case, but there is still the appeal from the ANC, from the Gauteng provincial government. The other political parties in Tshwane are parties to that as well. They could still win that case on appeal. What happened today could actually be overturned and the administrator could come back.
Well, in that time there will have been several months of normal administration, i.e. through the people that are duly elected by the citizens of Tshwane. This is an enormously important principle that we've won today, and that is the separation of powers, and that's why the court ruled in which the manner in which they did. It was in order to be able to make good the constitutional order that is envisaged in the Constitution. It's highly unlikely that a constitutional court would disagree with the Gauteng North High Court, but we'll obviously have to wait and see. But that's months away, Stephen. It was important that we actually restored the normal local government by a government of people that were elected by the people.
This came about because your mayor, Stevens Mokgalapa, resigned, or you basically made him resign, if I remember correctly. Then, on your version, the EFF and the ANC councillors refused to come to the meetings, the council meetings. That meant that there was no one left. There was no deputy mayor, there was no city manager at the time, there is now, and that meant there was no leadership. The Gauteng provincial government then took the decision to take the city into administration. Right. Do you think it's now actually possible to hold an election? In other words, for that to happen, the EFF and the ANC councillors have to come to the meeting, and they refused to last time.
Yes, and one of the things that you must note, Stephen, is that part of the judgment that was handed down was an order compelling the ANC and the EFF to attend the council meeting. This is something that is not, the fact of the matter is that the code of conduct is there. They should not have had a court action to force them to be there. In fact, if the MEC had any interest in proper local governance, he would have ordered the councillors to be in the meeting as per the code of conduct. Instead, the court has had to do that. They don't have to vote for the DA. They could vote for a candidate that between the two of them, that they have a majority. They could easily, between the two of them, outvote all of the other parties. Well, if they don't like a DA mayor, then instead of disrupting, all that they need to do is to put up a candidate of their own and jointly vote for that person. So it remains to be seen. They don't have to vote. There doesn't have to be an outright majority of all councillors. There isn't a magic number like 108 or something. There just needs to be a majority of those present and voting. And we have the biggest caucus out of all of the caucuses. If the ANC don't put up a candidate, don't vote for somebody, well, our candidate will win one way or another without any other candidates in the field. We're confident that we will probably have a situation where either there's a unanimous decision on Friday because certain principles have been set down and that the councillors will abide by those principles, or there will be people who may or may not be there quite grudgingly and just sit there because they've been compelled to by a court, but they will be there, and they may or may not vote for some or other candidate. Our candidate, I think, is going to win, Stephen, and we'll see a DA-led coalition run Tshwane once more.
Okay, but I mean, of course, Mike, you could be wrong, and it could turn out that you've won 2 court victories and hand Tshwane back to a coalition of the EFF and the ANC.
Yes, of course, and it's not a problem for us. I mean, we've been in opposition for, many years in many places. It's something that we actually pride ourselves in, that we do well. We hold governments accountable. So it's not about being in government. This matter was about a principle that a local authority should not be unseated by disruption and destabilization purely because when voters voted, they voted for minority government to be in place with coalitions, but in an environment where there's an overriding province that is dominated by one party who didn't win the election and says to themselves, we've lost this council, but we can actually get it back by engaging in disruption. By taking these court actions, we have protected Tshwane and the constitutional sovereignty of a local government. Not only Tshwane, but dozens of governments that could come about in next year's elections, where we will probably see, because of the trend in voting patterns, ANC losing more and more councils, but controlled by minority governments in provinces where the ANC has an overwhelming majority. Would they resist the temptation to interfere and disrupt? This court outcome has said, you may not disrupt, and it has therefore preserved the integrity that the will of the citizens of a city will be preserved and protected by the Constitution and the courts that uphold that Constitution.
It's quite a brave prediction to make about next year's local government elections, Mike Moriarty. I'll be interested to see if what you say does come true. I'm sure the ANC and the EFF would have a very different view. I do need to ask, okay, a lot has changed since all of this happened. So when the ANC and the EFF councillors refused to attend the meeting, and they pretty much said that they refused to attend the meeting, I don't think that's controversial. That was still in the era of physical meetings. Now, that sounds like a long time ago. It was only 2 or 3 months ago. The world's changed since then, right? Now, the National Assembly has been having what they call hybrid meetings, so on Zoom and in sort of physical space, actually going to the National Assembly chamber. What is going to happen in Tshwane in terms of the meeting? I presume the Speaker will have to be there. For social distancing reasons, you couldn't have all the councillors there. The point I'm trying to get to is that we've all been part of Zoom meetings where making a connection is difficult. It would be pretty easy not to come to that meeting virtually if you really didn't want to.
Well, you can see who's on a meeting and who's not. So you can see if you've got a quorum or not. So I think that the situation is, can the electronic means provide the Speaker with the control that a Speaker is always intended to have, even in a physical meeting? The so-called order that you would normally hear from a Speaker. Well, the electronic means ought to provide the same level of control that a Speaker should normally enjoy.
I do need to ask you about your administration in Tshwane before and the problems that you had there, because if you are correct on your version, we'll have to wait and see, and you're able to create a new administration in Tshwane. Stevens Mokalapa was forced to resign because of, it seemed his relationship with another councillor. There were big issues with the water in Hammanskraal. Do you really believe you're actually able to govern properly in Tshwane if you do win on Friday after all of those problems?
Stephen, yes, the short answer is yes. The longer answer is that there are many competent officials and there are plans that were in place to address quite a lot of shortcomings that were a legacy from the previous administration 5 years ago. Those plans were declared to Maile. He just ignored them, and he wouldn't let the administration continue and to follow through and to expedite. We know that there are only 15 months left, Stephen. So if anything, there's a huge impetus and motivation for us to get it right. We want to be able to contest an election next year on a good record. This is something that we have prided ourselves that, in all of those local authorities that are governed well in this country, 75% of them would be governed by the DA at any analysis. We would want Tshwane to be among that 75% of good governments in this country, so that we could go to the electorate and say, this is why you should vote for the DA.
Mike Moriarty from the Gauteng Democratic Alliance. I do appreciate the time. Thank you.